Thematic investing is about having conviction in the structural shifts shaping our world. But with an ever-growing menu of options, investors need to know how to build the engine that drives growth in the theme of their choice. Welcome to WisdomTree's Fireside Chat. I'm Mobeen Tahir, and today, to talk about looking under the bonnet of thematic ETFs, I'm joined by Pierre Debru and Elvira Kuramshina. Now, when it comes to thematic investing, it's important to look under the bonnet. Take AI, for example. How can two seemingly identical products look so different in the same theme? What do investors need to look out for?
Yeah, so when you AI fund, it sounds so simple, right? Exposure to artificial intelligence. But in reality, it's very complex because if you look at two different AI funds, they may be very different, right? And it's because there is no artificial intelligence market index that you can really follow. And there is no clear definition of what is or what isn't an AI stock, right? It's not like a US small cap or a European real estate stock where the definition is black and white. With AI, it's a lot more gray. And so that makes it more difficult. Now, the issue is that those differences are not going to be cosmetic difference for the investors. It's going to be different in return, different in risk, and whether you get real exposure to AI or just lip service, right? A lot of funds use an AI label or even any thematic label, right? Because it sounds good. And if you think back to 2022, you had a lot of metaverse funds, right? But the reality is that when you look under the bonnet, like you said, there's a lot of differences. The methodology are different. The concentration is going to be different. The exposure to the value chain are going to be different. All of the methodology can be different, right, at the end of the day. And so you may have some fund that invest mostly in mega caps. And so you get something that is very similar to the NASDAQ, for example. Or you're going to have some other fund with a similar name, which are going to invest in small, specialized firms that really have that potential to grow exponentially with the theme, right? And so that's why it's really important to understand what the different strategies do. And you really want to understand if the investment process is really aligned to the investment thesis, right? That's really pushing the theme forward, or if it's not.
This idea of purity of exposure stands out. It's talked about quite a lot in the world of thematic investing. But what exactly does purity of exposure mean, and how do you assess it as an investor in such a crowded ETF landscape?
Thank you for the question, Mobeen. It's a very important point because purity of exposure is the key concept in thematic investing. And it might sound simple, but in fact, it hides actually a number of nuances. Let's take again artificial intelligence. So as an investor, do you want to invest in AI enablers, meaning AI infrastructure providers, chip designers, or also in software platforms which are commercializing AI? Maybe in AI adopters that are integrating AI into their workflows. Then how about small caps whose business revolves solely around AI, or mega caps that are investing heavily but only have part of their revenues attributed to AI? And finally, maybe also companies that just mention AI on their earnings calls. All these companies can be labeled as AI and can be part of an AI strategy, but the return profile that they will deliver can vary widely. At WisdomTree, it's our belief that purity starts with methodology. So we tailor each strategy to its theme, and all our design choices are driven by the intention to deliver pure, relevant, and compelling exposures as the theme evolves.
Yeah, the key is really the methodology, right? You need to understand and you need to embed in the methodology a few things. The first thing is you need to embed the alignment to the theme, right? You need to have a kind of mind map of what the value chain for the theme is and try to understand where the value is going to accrue as the theme develops, right? Is the value going to accrue with the infrastructure provider? Is it going to accrue with the software developers? Is it Is it going to accrue with the end users, right? And so that's how you have to think about the space. And then, as Elvira was saying, then you have to design a unique strategy that is tailored for that specific theme to really try to align the stock selection and the stock weighting to maximizing the value that you can capture for that theme, right? And that's how you very much avoid theme washing, right? Now, to do that, of course, you need theme expertise. And so that's why at WisdomTree, we combine our own strong in-house thematic research with partnership with theme-specific industry experts to really try to get that alignment between the portfolio and the theme, right? The second thing, once you have this alignment, is the portfolio selection. The key is very much to go and select stocks that are going to be the most aligned to the theme as you can. So looking for stocks that have high revenue or high beta to the theme. And that's really the type of stocks you really want in the portfolio. And then weighting. Weighting is also very important because you want to overweight the company that really have the highest revenue, right? Or the highest alignment to the theme. And then you want to underweight, or maybe you want even to exclude, right? Those diversified giants that touch the theme but are not key to it, right? And by combining those three things, what you can get is you can amplify the signal of the theme, right? And avoid to be drowned in the noise of the market in general, right?
We focused on the idea of purity of exposure, but each theme is very different. And all of these things have to be translated into a practical investment strategy in real life. How do investors go about doing that?
The best, right, is to take a few examples. We discussed how you want to be aligned to the theme, how the stock selection and the stock weighting are going to be key, right? So let's start with the alignment to the theme, right? And we could start with the WisdomTree uranium and nuclear energy strategy, right? So if you think about nuclear energy and you think about the value chain, right? Clearly, you're going to have the uranium miners and the uranium refiners, right? So they're going to be upstream in the value chain. Then you're going to have what you could call midstream, which is building the nuclear plants, right? Building the turbines, all of this. Then you're going to have the utilities that are going to run the plants and sell the electricity, right? And then you start thinking, okay, which company will make money as we get more and more nuclear energy in service, right? And what you're going to realize at one point is that for the utilities, running a nuclear plant is extremely constraintful. There is a lot of regulation, of course, and so it's very expensive. But also, when it comes to selling the electricity, in many countries, the electricity price is regulated. And therefore, they are a little bit stuck in the middle between the cost and that limit to how much money they can charge, making them price takers. So if we come back to this WisdomTree nuclear strategy, we decided not to include the utilities because we don't think that's where most of the value can accrue. But there is also the innovators, those companies that currently are developing the next step, which is those small modular reactors, right? And we think they're more important to the theme than the utilities are. And so when it comes to the strategy, again, it's about the upstream, the midstream, and the innovator, and it's not about the utilities. So that's one example of how you can align the strategy to the theme in order to really get that value extraction. Yeah, so that's for alignment, right? But if we move to, again, stock selection and stock weighting, we could take another example. So let's take the WisdomTree European defense strategy, right? And here you'll see first that in the selection, the key is about how do you balance purity with diversification, right? So you could say, okay, I want European domiciled company with a lot of defense revenue, right? That's obviously what you want. And so let's say you say the company I'll select will have at least 50% of revenue from defense. You're going to be left with 10 stock, right? And so you can't do a diversified portfolio with 10 companies. And also you're going to miss some very big names. You're going to miss Airbus, you're going to miss Safran because they do other things, right? So at WisdomTree, we decided to have a minimum at 10% of defense revenue, right? So any company that has at least 10% revenue will be in the strategy. And so that gives you around 30, 35 stocks. So you have diversification. But now you say, okay, but I have some stocks that are going to have 100% revenue to defense, and I have some stocks that are going to have 10% revenue from defense, right? They should not be equal in the strategy. So that's where the weighting comes and complete the selection. So what we do here again is we split the companies in 3 groups, something we call exposure score, right? So you're going to have the company with an exposure score of 3, which have more than 50% revenue from defense. Then you have the one with an exposure score of 2, which are between 25 and 50% of revenue. And then the one with an exposure score of 1, which are between 10 and 25, right? And the way we use that exposure score is by saying, instead of market cap weighting, we're going to modify the market cap with the score. So a company that is exposure score 3 will behave in terms of weighting as if it was 3 times bigger than it is. And a company that is exposure score 1 will behave with its real size. And what it means is that you get 3 times more weight for a company that is in score 3 than in score 1. And so by combining a thoughtful selection and a thoughtful weighting, you can very much balance that purity and give more weight to the pure players, and at the same time get a diversified portfolio. So that's really how you can play with selection and weighting to achieve that goal. But of course, this example works for defense, but it could be very different for another strategy in our range.
Let's continue with our cybersecurity strategy and the importance of various decisions within the selection and weighting process for the final exposure that the strategy delivers. So within the selection process, we're using 2 metrics, the focus score and the growth score. Together with our expert partner, Team 8, we have identified the key themes that are driving the future of cybersecurity. And the focus score allows to assess to which of those themes each company is exposed. And the idea is the more themes the company is exposed to, the better its growth opportunities are. So that's why in the second step, we are also looking at the growth score to identify those companies which are better at monetizing all those presented growth opportunities. Next, in the weighting process, we also leverage exactly these 2 key metrics to tilt our final portfolio to those companies which are growing their revenues much faster and which are also exposed to more themes within the cybersecurity, which means that they're also better positioned to capture the growth in the theme and all the associated opportunities.
Coming back to your questions, right? You see through these different strategies that we discussed about, are they all different, but in principle they're the same. It is about finding where the value is and try to find the companies that are able to transform this value into investment return, right? And that's really the key about thematic investment. It's about trying to find the portfolio that is going to deliver that long-term growth.
So a lot of useful takeaways there for investors when it comes to thematic investing. Pierre, Elvira, thank you very much. That was WisdomTree's Fireside Chat on thematic investing. We'll see you next time.